I knew something was wrong the moment my front door shook like it might break off its hinges. My son's voice exploded through the house. Sharp and furious. "Mom, explain this right now." Before I could respond, let me pause for just a moment. Before we begin, a huge thank you to all of you. We hit 500 subs. Thank you all so much. Help us reach 1,000 by hitting like and subscribe right now. Also, let me know how you're doing in the comments. Now, let's jump into the story. Paul stormed into my living room, his face red. His hands clenched so tight his knuckles looked white. Right behind him was Melanie, my daughter-in-law, sobbing dramatically like she'd just been betrayed by the world itself. "You humiliated me," she cried, pointing at me. "Your card was declined at the store." Everyone was staring. The cashier thought I was stealing. I sat perfectly still in my chair by the window, my tea untouched and already cold. What neither of them knew was that I had heard everything, every word, every lie before they even walked through the door. "Is it true?" Paul demanded. "Did you block your card knowing Melanie was going to use it?" After 16 years of life, I never imagined my own son would look at me like I was a criminal. I opened my mouth to speak, ready to finally explain the months of disrespect, the quiet manipulation, the way they had slowly taken over my home. But before I could say a single word, the front door opened again, and everything changed. A calm, unfamiliar voice filled the room. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Hayes. I'm here as we arranged." Paul froze. Melanie stopped crying instantly, like someone had hit a mute button. The air felt heavy, almost painful to breathe. But to understand why my son was screaming at me in my own house, why his wife looked at me with pure hatred. You need to know how this all began. 6 months earlier, my life was quiet, too quiet. Maybe, but it was peaceful. I was a widow, living alone in the house my late husband and I built together. Every room held memories.com. Every corner felt safe. Then one afternoon, the phone rang. "Mom," Paul said, sounding stressed. "We're having problems with our apartment. The rent went up. Melanie and I need a place to stay. Just for a couple of months." I didn't hesitate. I didn't ask questions. "This is your home," I told him. "You're always welcome." I didn't realize I had just invited trouble through my front door, and I had no idea that letting them move in would turn my own home into a battlefield. Because what started as just 2 months would soon become the biggest mistake of my life, and the first sign that my son was no longer on my side. At first, having Paul and Melanie in the house seemed manageable. I told myself it was temporary. Just 2 months, he had promised. I had nothing to fear. But the warning signs appeared almost immediately. Paul was exhausted when he came home from work, barely speaking. Melanie, supposedly job hunting online, spent most of her days scrolling social media. I tried to keep up my routine, believing normalcy would hold everything together. Coffee at 6. Morning news, tending my garden. Needlepoint in the afternoons. But slowly, the house began to feel smaller, suffocating. My personal space, the one thing I had always controlled, was disappearing. One morning, Melanie barged into the living room. "Sylvia, can you turn the TV down?" She snapped, her voice sharp, impatient. "I'm on an important call." The volume hadn't changed from my usual setting. I lowered it anyway, swallowing the irritation rising in my chest. Later, she inspected my cooking, standing over me like a critic in a restaurant kitchen. "Too much oil? Paul can't eat this." I tried to smile, to stay calm. But it was hard not to feel judged, evaluated, found wanting in my own home. When I confronted her, she shrugged, her eyes cold. "We're just helping. You should update your methods." And then came the drawer incident. I walked into my bedroom one afternoon and caught her rifling through my papers, my bank statements, my private documents. "What are you doing?" My voice was sharp, hands trembling. "Oh, I was just looking for a phone charger," she said, her lie as smooth as silk. Paul has a right to know about finances, right? My blood ran cold. This wasn't care. It wasn't concern. This was control disguised as convenience. I took the papers back, locked them away, and felt a growing anger that was impossible to ignore. I tried talking to Paul. Son, she went through my personal documents. That's not acceptable. He didn't look up from his phone. Mom, she wouldn't do that with bad intentions. You're overreacting. Overreacting. That word cut deeper than any scream or accusation. Overreacting was how my own son dismissed my feelings, my instincts, my experience. By the end of that week, Melanie's demands had escalated. Money for groceries. Requests for my debit card. Casual invasions of my space. Each encounter chipped away at my sense of safety. Until I realized something terrifying. The temporary stay was no longer temporary. And the people I trusted most were turning my own home against me. I knew then that if I didn't act, my life, my finances, and even my dignity could be stripped from me, piece by piece. Because the real danger wasn't just her grit, it was Paul's willingness to let it happen. And soon, I would need to make a choice that would change everything. It wasn't just the small invasions that unnerved me anymore. It was the way Paul simply accepted them. The way he dismissed my concerns as if I were imagining the danger. One afternoon, I came home to find Melanie standing over my kitchen counter, holding my debit card like it was a household prop. Sylvia, I'll do the grocery shopping today, she said, voice sweet but eyes sharp. I just need your card and the PIN. I felt a cold anger rise in my chest. I can go myself, I said, my voice calm but firm. I've always done it. Her smile froze, replaced with an expression I couldn't mistake for anything but irritation. You don't trust me. I'm your son's wife. We're practically family. Family, that word had lost all meaning in this house. I held my ground. My card is personal. You will not have it. Melanie's patience snapped. You're selfish. Paul said you have money saved up. You refuse to help us. You're cruel. I stayed seated, heart pounding. She stormed out, slamming the door, leaving a silence so thick I could almost hear it settle in the corners of the room. I realized in that moment that I was dealing with someone who felt entitled to my life, my home, my money, and worse. Someone who had my son's complicity. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed the day's events, her hands on my card, her sneaky smiles, Paul's dismissive tones. I knew I needed proof. I couldn't rely on memories or my son's promises. I needed evidence. The next morning, while Melanie and Paul were out, I installed a small security camera in my bedroom. It wasn't easy admitting I had to spy on my own family, but the instinct to protect myself outweighed the shame. 2 days later, I watched the footage. My heart sank as I saw Melanie enter my room when I wasn't home. She rifled through my drawers, photographing my documents with her phone, attempting to open the little safe where I kept my jewelry. Every motion, every step, every glance in that video screamed betrayal. This wasn't care or curiosity, it was planning. And my son. My son did nothing. I knew then that the fight for my home and my dignity wasn't just about money. It was about respect, survival, and reclaiming my place in my own life. If I waited any longer, the situation could spiral beyond repair. Because the moment I confronted them with this evidence, nothing would ever be the same, and I would discover just how far they were willing to go to take everything I had built. I never thought it would come to this moment. I had to confront my own son and his wife with evidence that would shock them. And yet, I knew it couldn't wait any longer. It was late afternoon when Paul and Melanie returned. I waited in the living room, hands clasped around a cup of cold tea, heart racing but mind sharp. We need to talk, I said quietly, almost too calmly. Paul looked at me, confused. Melanie's eyes narrowed, suspicious. About what? Paul asked, his voice tight, wary. I didn't answer immediately. I set my phone on the coffee table, screen facing them. This, I said, this is everything I've recorded while you were in my house. Every drawer you opened, every document you photographed, every attempt to access my finances without permission. Melanie laughed nervously, trying to brush it off. What are you talking about? I'm talking about this, I said, pressing play. The security footage filled the screen. Melanie's hands rifled through my drawers. She snapped photos of my documents. She tried the small safe. Paul leaned in, disbelief spreading across his face. No, he muttered. This can't be. It's real, I said, my voice steady. And it's only part of it. I also contacted the bank after your failed attempt to use my card. Every unusual activity is blocked. Every fraudulent attempt recorded. You've underestimated me. Melanie's face paled. Her lips pressed together in a tight line. Sylvia. This is... Stop calling me that, I said sharply. I'm done being polite. You've crossed every line in this house, and my son has allowed it. Paul's anger mixed with shame, confusion, and fear. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Melanie's dramatic tears were gone, replaced with the kind of cold realization that comes when you know you've been caught. You're not getting away with this, I continued. I've documented everything. The cards, the accounts, the plans you discussed. The eviction notice is ready. You have been living here for months under false pretenses, and it stops today. The silence that followed was thick, almost suffocating. I felt the weight of months of fear and anxiety lift, replaced with a calm determination I hadn't known I possessed. I realized I was no longer just defending my home, I was defending my life, my dignity, and my right to be respected in the place I had built with my own hands. Because what happened next would test every bond in this family, push my courage to the limit, and set in motion a reckoning that none of us could have imagined. The room felt heavier than ever. Paul sank into the couch, his hands covering his face. Melanie stood frozen, her mouth slightly open, eyes darting between the screen and me. For the first time in months, I saw fear where there had once been arrogance. I never wanted it to get this far, Paul finally whispered. His voice cracked, small and uncertain. We were just desperate. Desperate. That word didn't soften the betrayal. It didn't erase the months of manipulation, the lies, the intrusions. Desperate, I said, my tone steady. Doesn't give anyone the right to invade my life or take what's mine. You've treated my home as if it belonged to you. You've treated me as if I didn't matter. That ends now. Melanie stepped forward, trying to regain control. Sylvia, mon plaisir. We need more time. We haven't found an apartment yet. We were counting on... No, I interrupted. You had 5 months. You've been living under false pretenses. You've tried to manipulate my son, my money, and my home. That stops today. I picked up my phone and called James Sullivan, my lawyer. James, it's time, I said simply. Within minutes, he arrived, briefcase in hand, calm but authoritative. 2 uniformed officers followed him, silent but firm. Paul's face drained of color. Melanie froze mid-step, like a deer caught in headlights. The energy in the room shifted immediately. This was no longer just a family argument. It was serious, official, irreversible. Mrs. Hayes, James said, placing a thick folder on the coffee table. The eviction notice is ready. All the documentation you need is here. You're within your rights to have them leave immediately. I signed. My hand was steady, my mind clear. It's done, I said. The words felt like fire and ice all at once. I was closing the door on the chaos that had invaded my life. Paul's voice rose, pleading, desperate. Mom, please, I'm still your son. Give us a chance. I gave you chances, I said, my voice calm but icy. For 5 months, I tried to be patient, to trust you, to protect our family. That trust is gone. You have 24 hours to leave. Melanie's face contorted with anger and disbelief. But I didn't flinch. I had made my decision, and nothing she said could change it. My home, my rules, my dignity finally, I was reclaiming them. Because the next 24 hours would be the longest of their lives, and I was ready to watch them face the consequences of every lie, every attempt to manipulate, every act of betrayal. The next morning, the house felt alive with tension, every creak of the floorboard sounding like a countdown. Paul and Melanie moved silently, packing their belongings with heavy steps, their faces pale and strained. The energy in the air was electric fear, frustration, and disbelief mixed with the cold certainty that they had lost control. I stayed in the kitchen, sipping coffee, watching from the doorway. For months, I had felt like a ghost in my own home, hiding from them to avoid conflict. Now, I could move freely, walk through my rooms without apology or fear. Every corner of the house belonged to me again. Paul carried a suitcase to the car, his hands trembling slightly. "Mom," he began, voice weak. Go," I said softly but firmly. "And don't come back until you understand what respect means." Melanie followed, casting a final glare at me, but she said nothing. The hours stretched as they loaded boxes and bags into their car. Every step, every slam of a suitcase lid, reminded me of the months I had endured, months of lies, theft, manipulation, and the betrayal of my own son. By mid-afternoon, the driveway was filled with their belongings. Paul paused for a moment, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Regret, anger, perhaps a mixture of both. I hope someday you'll forgive me," he said softly. I didn't respond. Forgiveness wasn't mine to give, not yet. Not after the pain and betrayal I had endured. At 5:45, the last of their bags were loaded. Paul and Melanie got into their car. I watched until they turned the corner and disappeared from view. The house fell into a profound silence different from any silence I had known in the past 5 months. This was clean, unbroken, mine. I locked the doors and walked through each room. Their presence had left marks, furniture slightly moved, personal items discarded, memories stirred, but now I could reclaim the space for myself. I opened the windows, letting in sunlight and fresh air, and felt the weight of months of fear lift from my shoulders. That evening, Laura, my neighbor and friend, came over with tea and a sympathetic smile. "You did it, Sylvia," she said softly. "You stood up for yourself." I nodded, tears quietly forming, not from sadness, but from relief and liberation. "It's over," I whispered. "Finally, it's over." But even in that quiet, I knew I couldn't let my guard down completely. The events of the past months had taught me lessons I couldn't forget, and the strength I had discovered would be needed again sooner than I imagined. Because even though they were gone, the battle for my peace and security was far from finished. And the next challenge would test every ounce of courage I had left. The days after Paul and Melanie left were strangely quiet. I moved through the house, room by room, rediscovering the space that had been mine long before anyone else arrived. The air smelled of flowers from the garden Richard and I had planted together, and for the first time in months, I could breathe freely. I spent the mornings tending to the plants, the afternoons finishing needlepoint projects I had abandoned, and the evenings drinking tea by the window, listening to the silence. Each small act felt like reclaiming a part of myself that had been buried under months of fear, frustration, and betrayal. Yet even in this calm, reminders of the past lingered. Documents had been moved, drawers left open. The smallest signs of intrusion haunted me, whispering that I needed to stay vigilant. I called James Sullivan again, updating him on my security measures, and making sure my accounts and property were fully protected. His calm, professional voice reminded me that I was no longer defenseless. Then came the messages from Paul. At first, they were frantic and pleading. "Mom, I know you're upset. I just want a chance to explain." I ignored the first few. Then a second batch arrived, more desperate, hinting at regret but still demanding my attention. I read them, felt a twinge of old affection, but I didn't respond. Weeks passed. Slowly, the messages dwindled. For the first time, I could truly enjoy my home, my routines, my life. I even began reconnecting with hobbies I had abandoned, dancing in the living room as if no one were watching, sharing tea with Laura, and laughing freely without worrying about someone judging me. 3 months later, there was a knock at the door. Through the glass, I saw Paul. He looked older, smaller somehow, and his posture was different, humbled, cautious. I didn't open the door immediately. I watched him wait, the screen door acting as a small but important barrier between us. When I finally opened the door, I left it closed behind the screen. "Hi, Mom," he said, soft and almost fearful. I nodded, no words of welcome, no embrace, just acknowledgement. "I've been going to therapy," he continued, trying to understand how I let things go so wrong, how I let Melanie manipulate me, how I hurt you. I studied him, noting every hesitation, every tremor in his voice. He wasn't the confident man who had dismissed my concerns and sided with Melanie. He seemed smaller, fragile but sincere. "I don't come for forgiveness," he said. "I only want you to know I'm trying to be better, to understand what I lost and who I hurt." I didn't answer immediately. I let his words sink in. For the first time, I saw a glimpse of the son I had raised, the one who had once loved and respected me. But I also knew that actions mattered more than words, because even though he admitted his mistakes, the real test wasn't his apology. It was whether he had truly learned the meaning of respect and responsibility. And I wasn't ready to find out just yet. I stood at the doorway, watching Paul fidget, the screen door between us, a subtle but necessary boundary. I wanted to believe the man in front of me was my son, the one I had raised, loved, and protected, but years of betrayal had taught me caution. "I know I can't undo the past," Paul said quietly, his eyes downcast. "But I want you to know that Melanie is gone, and I've finally started to see things clearly. I'm trying to be better." I studied him. His hair was shorter, his shoulders slumped, and there was a vulnerability in his voice I hadn't heard in years. For the first time, I sensed humility instead of entitlement, fear instead of arrogance. "I hear you," I said finally, keeping my tone neutral. "But hearing is not the same as trusting. Words don't change what happened. Only actions do." Paul nodded, a small, defeated movement. "I understand. I just wanted you to know I've changed, that I'm taking responsibility for my mistakes." I let the silence stretch, letting him sit with the weight of what he had done. The consequences of siding with someone who tried to rob me, manipulate me, and disrespect everything I had built. In those quiet moments, I realized the power had shifted. The fear, anxiety, and uncertainty that had ruled my life were gone. Over the following weeks, I settled into my routines again. The house was mine, truly mine, and every corner reflected the life Richard and I had built. I reconnected with old friends, joined a local dance class, and even started teaching a needlepoint group to other women who had been underestimated or mistreated. Laura visited often, a comforting presence, and we shared stories and laughter, reclaiming joy I hadn't realized I'd lost. I even discovered that independence could feel sweet, liberating, and empowering. Paul reached out occasionally, always through text, at first, slowly building his way back, never demanding forgiveness, always respectful. I saw glimpses of the son I had loved, but I was careful. I had learned that protecting my dignity and my peace came first. And as I sat by the window one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, I realized something profound. I had fought, I had endured, and I had reclaimed my life. I had learned the value of boundaries, the strength of saying no, and the courage of standing up for myself even against my own family. I was no longer just a mother, a widow, or a caretaker. I was a woman who had chosen herself, And that choice was the most powerful act of love I could ever give, both to myself and to those who truly mattered, because sometimes the hardest battles are fought at home, and the greatest victories are the ones we achieve for our own dignity. And I had won mine.